Good evening from our headquarters in Kiev. This is This Sunday Show at Horbatiuk International, the only prime-time discussion of the geopolitical storm in Eastern Europe in English, and I'm Natalia Humaniuk. So today we are remembering the 5 years of the Euromaidan revolution. It had won. Yet it was exactly the days when 5 years ago, in the end of February, 18th, 20th, more than overall 90 people had died, 45 of them during exactly those days. Out of them, 78 people were demonstrators, the rest of them were law enforcement agents. But that was one of the most horrific crimes in the modern Ukrainian history, when the Ukrainian police had shot its own people. Yet, 5 years after, we know that the investigation is going on. Somehow people know about that, but we believe that what are the results of this? And unfortunately, I should say that there are not many journalists, not many authorities who are really looking into that carefully, finding out what's happening to the former riot police, what's happening to those who ordered the crimes, and the people don't know the details. It happened that my own colleague, Angelina Karyakina, is one of the Hromadske journalists who for all these years is following the story. You know, you've done the documentary a couple of years ago, but you're still doing that. So I'm happy to have my colleague Angelina Karyakina here in studio. And my first question would be really, I said, like, we decided to make this show really about that, to summarize, because still international audience don't really understand what's going on with the investigation. There are so many rumors, there are so many conspiracy theories, and somehow it's still not a topic. So what do we know?
You know, weirdly enough, not only the foreign audience, but also domestic audience here in Ukraine still has some things that are speculated over and politicized all the time. And I should say that it is really hard to keep on track, you know, in this trial. It has been on since 2015. The first suspects were arrested in 2014 already. So it's the 5th year of this case. It's the 5th year of this trial now, I should say. So from the very beginning, the investigation did say that the people who were responsible for the killings of the 48, I should correct you, not 45, but 48 people who were killed on Institutska Street on 20th of February were police special forces members, officers of Berkut. The investigation, the whole work of the investigation was to prove that and to find who was giving orders. So currently now, according to the prosecutor's office, it was a vertical line that went from Yanukovych and through the Minister of Interior, who fled. Now he's now in Russia, Mr. Zakrevska, and then back, you know, down the hierarchy, down to the Berkut officers and Kiev police. Now, who are in the court? Who are those people whom we know? They have faces, they have names. It's 5 officers. 5 officers are now on trial. They were arrested in 2014, and it's the people that Hromadske also talked to. I should say that they do not recognize that they're guilty, but what they say, though, is that they were defending themselves. So it's a contradictory thing that they say. But the prosecutors are saying, and they're giving evidence that specifically these people were there.
I probably would like also to show, you managed to talk to some of them. One of them was in the court, and another was just, you managed to have the interview some years after. So I probably would ask to run these short quotes.
On the 20th of February, who were the Berkut dealing with when they were securing the governmental quarter? With radical forces or with demonstrators?
If you want to understand, we should start with February the 18th. A peaceful march was announced. We received operational information that it was coming with arms. So we were ordered not to let them go to the Verkhovna Rada. The anti-Maidan was also taking place nearby.
Також йшли з метою, щоб два.
Did you receive information that the anti-Maidan protesters also had weapons?
Yes, people from that side were also detained for illegal possession of arms.
За незаконне володіння зброєю. Все почалося, що депутати пройшли.
It started with the demand to let people in. Because we had let MPs. At first, crowds started to build, then Molotov cocktails and rocks. After that, we had our first fatalities.
І коли пішли перші поранені і вбиті.
The breaking point was when we received information about the riot police being attacked with weapons. People from the internal military forces fell near us because of gunshot wounds.
At that time, protesters were also being killed. We talked to one commander. He told us the riot police were provided with weapons, bullet slugs in particular.
Якщо спецзасоби і отримувалися,
All I can say is it was taken pretty serious in our unit. People who had those riot control weapons were under strict control of command.
вони були дуже під, так сказати, під сильним контролем командування полку.
Talking about these weapons, you mean the semi-automatic Fort pistol?
Yeah.
Did your people have these as well?
Yeah.
On February the 18th?
I suppose 10 people had them.
Did they use Fort pistols?
Не знаю.
I don't know. I wasn't behind them.
Поряд з ним.
How did the morning of the 20th of February start for you?
With riot police officers being killed, as you know, armistice was announced on February the 19th. A line of riot police was standing there, not moving towards the scene. Some were trying to prove that a raid was planned, but all I can say is we had no such information.
Планувався штурм Майдану. Я можу сказати, що не було такої інформації.
And then you heard gunshots? From where?
Conservatoire.
Did you see the riot police throwing Molotov cocktails at it?
I saw, as well as the protesters.
It's official misconduct. You didn't do anything.
Про вас кажуть, що ви та людина, яка була в камуфляжі. Єдине. Що ви можете на це сказати?
Будь ласка, відійдіть. Шановні,
Моя зброя в підрозділі.
проходьте.
Ваша зброя що?
Це прокуратура знає.
Наприклад, у мене немає такої форми, яка була одягнена на ту особу. Але чомусь прокуратура дуже, їм так хочеться, щоб то був я.
Таким чином задовольнити клопотання прокурора, відмовити задоволення клопотання захисту Зінченка, оскільки відсутні підстави вважати, що інші менш суворі запобіжні заходи передбачені статтею 176 КПК, в тому числі і домашній арешт, можуть на даному етапі забезпечити виконання обвинувачення процесуальних обов'язків, що впливає частинника.
So we had a chance to see like the faces of the people who are on trial. It happens that many people in Ukraine, my question is very general. How happened that like a lot of people really don't know that there are these 5 people on court? Their names are not really kind of very much public.
Yeah, we actually very often we hear, where are those people who are responsible for the killings? Well, the prosecutors are saying, here they are, 5 of them, for 5 years on the same place. Each week on Tuesday and Thursday, there's this trial in Svetoshinsky court in Kiev for years, each Tuesday and each Thursday, and it's a jury. So it's a court that consists of several jurors, and they listen to this and they hear this trial. In my opinion, I think it is really hard to follow an event that is so continued in time, that people just, for some reason, they stopped paying attention to it.
But what's lacking in this trial? Are like some people are not given testimony, for instance, like former President Yanukovych, or what makes it so long?
Well, the fact that so many people were killed and so many people were injured takes so much time. 48 people were killed, 80 were injured. You can imagine that just double those numbers, it will also consist, the numbers of victims, it will be just around twice as that, because it's all the relatives, all the possible witnesses, and the whole jury needs to listen to each of them. So at this point, the jury has heard testimonies of the victims. So they stopped hearing the victims, and they will start hearing the witnesses. So it's going to take another time. Then they will stop hearing the witnesses, and they will start listening to the accused side. And then there will be debates, and then there will be a verdict. So according to different calculations, this whole trial may take another year. We have talked to the head of this jury, to the judge Dechuk, who is a former military judge. He's very disciplined, and I should say that I think that this historical trial is really lucky to have that sort of judge who is he's very tolerable in terms of openness, media and all that. But at the same time, he's very strict to the point, and he's trying to make everything not as quick as possible, but everything will stick to the point, but also, not prolong it for some different reasons. So he also says that it's going to take around this time, and he says that it's a normal time for such a case. It's a historical case of mass shootings in central city, so it will take time anyway, in any trial, in any city, in any country.
I would just say that besides what we are talking now, there is our own investigation done maybe some years ago, The Turning Point, which is available on our webpage. That if you haven't, and if you are like on Twitter now, we share the link right away. So in case you would like to get more on that, you can get more knowledgeable. Another question that today, even if you read a Western media and international media, there are still all the rumors and conspiracy theories about kind of another force, a third force, not just the Ukrainian government, not just the protesters who had participated, Georgian snipers, I don't know, like some Lithuanians, some other foreigners. Before asking a question, we have a quote of the special prosecutor Serhiy Horbatiuk, who earlier talked about these questions, what they know, and I ask you to make an update.
Тобто я зразу, щоб забрати всю конспірологію, тобто зараз говорити про те, що умовно якісь російські снайпери були, чи російські, не знаю, військові. Я саме не про тих, хто накази віддавав, там, може, консультував когось.
Так, на даний час про саме присутність якихось російських снайперів безпосередньо 20 лютого...
Чи будь-яких інших країн, так?
Чи будь-яких інших країн, тобто так званої третьої сили, на даний час немає підстав вважати. Знову ж таки, ми перевіряємо вплив так званих російських емісарів, які приїжджали в той час, на прийняття рішень керівництвом України.
So this information pops up. What do we know about that?
This information pops up sometimes deliberately in a number of documentaries or quasi-investigations by sometimes it's unknown foreign media in English, saying that there were different forces here in Ukraine, snipers from Georgia, from Lithuania, and with some people giving some testimonies about that. But according to what prosecutors are saying, the whole operation on the ground was led and commanded by the local police. And what they are really investigating, and we just heard the quote from the special prosecutor, is the fact that emissaries from Russia, in particularly Vladislav Surkov, who is the advisor to the president of Russia, well, the prosecutors had information that he was here around that time in late February. But what exactly his role was, and what he was communicating, and how did it, what impact did it have on the situation on the ground in Institutska, in Maidan? That is still a huge question, and there is a lot of speculation about that. But I think what we need to stress is the fact that in order to have a clear picture of what happened in late February and throughout those 3 months of of the protests, we need to have all the legal tools, and we are quite limited in that because, as you know, there is a law, the so-called law on amnesty, in Ukraine, which doesn't give an opportunity to the investigators to question and investigate anything done by the protesters themselves. It was done for a reason, and it was done also for a good reason, because there were lots of misconduct by the legislative system in 2013 and 14, where protesters were, taken to prisons for nothing, and it was a step to protect thousands of people who were taking part in the protests. But now we are in a sort of legal trap that doesn't give a prosecution an opportunity to investigate what needs to be investigated. And it is also the fact that the protesters also had some weapons to, as many say, to protect themselves. Because through all those 3 months, there were only 2 days when these weapons were shot. And it was after the storm against Maidan. So even people who had those guns, they could have used it at any moment, but they did use it at the most critical point when there was a crackdown on Maidan. So the investigators, according to this law, they cannot investigate it, they cannot question or arrest anyone. But Horbatiuk also did an investigation where we had a protester, his name is Yevhenia, who stated that he did have a gun and he did kill 2 of the policemen. So, in order to have as much information as possible and to be sure that it was exactly, this person who shot the policeman, but not the third, party, third agent or mysterious sniper, we also need all the legal tools to do that. And still there is some limitation to that.
There is another issue to follow, that currently the General Prosecutor of Ukraine, Yuriy Lutsenko, said that it's almost done. The investigation is almost done. However, what we then later learned from the lawyers, that it's not exactly the case, and there is some kind of rush by the General Prosecutor to kind of close this case, maybe to show that it's closed. And what we understand, it's also connected to the experiment which is taking place on the investigation taking place basically on the Institutskaya street, in the streets where it happened. We just recently showed the visuals. Now you can see the General Prosecutor Yuriy Lutsenko. But yeah, that's exactly the video we are showing, where we see now the reconstruction of the, they would like to build the monument. So what's critical about that?
So the most critical thing is that in order to keep this territory intact and to have this investigative experiment done in the way it should be done, you cannot move anything on that street. Now, according to Ukrainian law, it is status, how should I put this? This street is under arrest, so to say. So you cannot move anything, you cannot build there anything, you cannot take the stones out of that street. But for some reason, we heard from the General Prosecutor that this investigative experiment is over, and we need to, to start the construction of the memorial as soon as possible. Who needs that? I don't know. In my opinion, it looks like a political moment where a government, would need a memorial to, I don't know, for their own political reasons, maybe. They probably have some because the elections are coming, 2 campaigns are coming. So but the critical point is to preserve that street right now and to have that experiment done. And from what we see, part of the street is already, something has been moved there, and part of the street, on the part of the street already some constructive work started. So it is a really very much concerning fact for the investigation and also for the lawyers of the relatives of those who were killed.
So after the revolution, the Berkut riot police unit had been dismantled. Yet another special unit had been created. But what we know with other people, we just talked about 5 people who are on the trial. What do we know about the rest?
If I'm not mistaken, this special squad, which is called the Black Squad, or because they were wearing black. It's the police special forces. They had around 25 people, and 5 are on trial, and 20 of them fled. They just disappeared from Ukraine. Interestingly enough, 16 of them ended up in Russia, and 16 of them got Russian citizenship.
So we have their names, we know who they are.
The Ukrainian investigation turned to Ukrainian General Prosecutor's Office turned to Russia with an official request to question those people. But Russia officially denied Ukrainian prosecutors this opportunity, saying that there is a reason for a Russian national security why they wouldn't give or help in any way with questioning of those people. So many of them ended up in Russian police, and they ended up working there. 4 of them, according to prosecutors, are in occupied Crimea. We don't know if they serve in police or in some other forces, but they ended up in occupied Crimea. Of course, for us journalists, it's one of the most interesting and intriguing stories, destinies of those people, where they ended up. Some of them, yes, we know they are in Russian police now, in Russian militia, police, but the others, we also found out that, for example, one of the officers was killed for some reason in Chechnya, and last year, if I'm not mistaken, his family received his body, and they cannot say what was the reason of his, of his death, and it is very interesting for us to dig that story and to understand what happened to him.
I just like to show that I think our journalists traveled to see their parents,
to their
so we have
village.
some of the, not their quotes, but at least the video of those soldiers. There I think he's portrayed, and
we traveled to that village, and actually we wanted to talk to this officer's mother and also his sister. We know that he was in touch with his sister, and what they know is that his son, his name is Serhiy Horbatiuk, that he went to Russia, and that their instructor, trainer, helped them move to Russia. What exactly he was doing in Russia, according to some relatives, he was working as a masseuse, so he learned massage and he was working as a masseuse. Then he was working in the police, but there are also allegations that he might be serving in this so-called private military squad Wagner's, and that he could have taken part in some military operations in Syria. Unfortunately, it is really hard for us to have it as a fact. It's just the allegations, but still, it is an opportunity and it is a possibility for some of them to have, to have that life and to have that destiny.
Because as we also know, there were people who, for instance, Russian nationals who've been at the Donbas and Crimea, and later it was proved that they went to Syria and also participated in this Wagner group. Yet, what happened later? Because I would like to separate these stories, because there are a couple of different trials and different cases. There is
many of them, yes.
These horrific cases of the murders on the 18th of 20th of February, and earlier also the killing in January. But you also done the team, Hromadske team had done the story on the what's happening to the people who were in the beginning of the Maidan, the people who kind of were beating the students in the 30th of November. Before we're showing that, how would you introduce what's important in this story?
Well, it is a story of how this squad was dismantled, and it is actually a story of the police reform. So what we really wanted to know is Hromadske is following reforms in Ukraine generally, and of course we're taking a closer look specifically at the reform of law enforcement for 5 years now. We were really interested in, where did those officers go? Those officers who took part in the brutal crackdown on the students' Maidan, which actually gave the beginning to this whole, story with this 3 months protests. So what we found out is that not only some of the officers who took part or who were on trial, are now serving in police, but they're now commanders. So one of the officers who we investigated, and he, according to our investigation, he took part in that brutal beating, that night of brutal beating. He is now the commander of Kiev police special forces. So he's now the face, the hands, and the brain of this now so-called reformed police, which gives us a reason to say that it's the same Berkut, but just without the specific name Berkut.
So the whole story is on our webpage, and you also can find the link on our Twitter feed, and also I would ask that on our Facebook page. But I think, I suggest we watch the part of it on particularly the person who might be involved in the crackdown of the students and now has a really good position in the police.
It's November 30, 2013. Berkut is dispersing the protesters on Euromaidan. This is Serhiy Kusuk, the former commander of the Special Police Division Berkut. After Euromaidan, he fled to Russia, and the Ukrainian Prosecutor General's office put out a search warrant for him. Today, he's a colonel in the Russian Oman Special Police Force. And this is Andrei Diduk, one of Kusuk's deputies. In 2015, he was accused of participating in the dispersion of activists from Maidan in November 2013. His case is still in court. However, in 2016, he was still a commander of the Special Police Regiment, No. 1. This is yet another former Berkut deputy commander, now retired. Mykola Takniryadna is being tied together with Diduk. In this footage of the night of the dispersion, the man standing next to Takniryadna looks a lot like the former commander of Berkut's auto transport unit, Ruslan Tsukaluk. His story is even more interesting. Ruslan Tsukaluk did not escape to Russia. He faces no accusations and is not evading investigators. Things have gone much better for him than for other former Berkut commanders. In 2014, after Berkut was dissolved, he kept working in the Special Police Regiment. In 2015, he became deputy commander. By 2016, he had also become the regiment's chief of staff. And in 2017, on the 29th anniversary of the regiment's establishment, practically the anniversary of Berkut, he became its head.
Police Lieutenant Colonel Ruslan Tsukaluk is appointed commander of the Special Police Regiment by the order of the head of the National Police Force in Kiev on December 13, 2017, for his personal and professional qualities, exemplary work, responsibility and scrupulous attitude toward performing his duties.
At least 2 law enforcement officers who asked to remain anonymous said that it is a well-known fact that Tsukaluk was on the Maidan during the dispersion. However, he has refused to comment on the video footage.
Щодо 30 листопада 2013 року. У нас є відео, власне...
Звертайтесь, будь ласка, в Центр комунікації, Володимирська, 15.
Ми розуміємо, але у нас є відео, де, власне, зафіксовано, що ви там були.
Я там не був, шановна.
30 листопада. Ви можете подивитися відео, будь ласка, і скажіть, що ви там робили тоді, 30 листопада? Ви там просто поряд з Миколою Тягнирядном, Дидюком. І нас, як журналістів, цікавить...
Не заважайте мені працювати.
Я не заважаю вам працювати.
Не заважайте мені працювати.
Пане Руслане.
The former leaders of the division, now on trial, also refused to comment on the video.
Я його там не бачив.
Я вам можу показати відео.
Я вам кажу, що я його там не бачив. Не бачив я його там.
Він поряд з вами стоїть, ходить, і ви його не бачите.
Я кажу, що я його там не бачив.
Є Руслан Тсукалюк, і він знаходиться перед вами з Миколою Тягнирядном. Він тоді був з вами, ви знаєте, так про це?
Є слідчі, ви до них зверніться.
Що тоді робив Руслан Тсукалюк там?
Я не пам'ятаю. Я не пам'ятаю.
Що він там робив і чиї накази він...
Я взагалі не пам'ятаю, чи він там був.
Він був, от подивіться відео. Він тут, це він. Будь ласка, ну він там точно був.
Є потерпілі, там є свідки, нехай вони дивляться згідно чинного законодавства, нехай це все проходить правильно. І був керівник підрозділу на той час, може його який команда. Якщо він там був, то можливо, які його команда виконує. Дивіться, це не зовсім буде навіть правильно, те, що я зараз буду щось дивитися і вам коментувати.
Чому?
Ну тому що є прокуратура, є слідчі органи, нехай вони...
Але просто підтвердити.
Нехай вони це розбираються, ну це не зовсім правильно.
The head of Kiev's police force, who appointed Tsukaluk head of the special regiment, believes these questions should be addressed by the criminal investigation, not him.
I am aware that Tsukaluk has not been held accountable, and he has not been dismissed from service. I have no further comment. I repeat, I have nothing more to say. The Prosecutor General will decide whether or not he committed any crimes. I haven't seen the video. I don't have time to watch it.
We also turned to the Prosecutor General's office, but did not receive any detailed information.
The person in question has been questioned as a witness in a number of criminal proceedings, based on facts of illegal actions by law enforcement officers and judges toward participants in the protests that took place between November 2013 and February 2014.
Serhiy, who was injured during the dispersion of Euromaidan, has been conducting his own investigation over the past 5 years. He has compared uniforms, two-way radios, and has identified tens of Special Forces officers. He's sure that the man in this footage from November 30 is Sukaluk.
Here is a heavy-set man holding a radio with the same markings as the one in the video and photos we looked at. He is performing actions that could be characterized as directing the herding of people into an underground passageway. Here you see people, most likely Kyiv Berkut officers, following the orders to disperse the protesters given by Deputy Commander Duke, who before this was directing the beating and dispersal of people from around the central column on Euromaidan, continuing to push citizens into the underground passageway. And here is our potential 2013 commander of the Auto Transport Unit. This headset he's wearing is another sign he's not a regular officer. Those don't have headsets. Regular officers have bulletproof vests, assault equipment, and protective gear for their arms and legs.
In this video, a man who looks like Sukaluk is pulling a protester from the crowd. Even if Sukaluk himself did not use undue force, he, like the rest of the law enforcement officers, was obliged to report the violence employed by other Special Forces officers. However, this was not done. We decided to ask the developers of a face recognition system to perform an analysis. The program calculates the number of coinciding elements in an image and analyzes the face.
Here is the first photo. There are 68 points on the face, which it located in this square. And according to these points, the system draws its conclusions. We don't know whether the system measures the distance between the eyes, or between the eye and nose or chin. It works a bit like a black box. Here is the second photo, which we compared with the first. Again, you can see the facial features. Based on these points, the system calculates a unique 128-dimensional vector for each person, which it uses to draw a conclusion. Here is the first photo and the second. We compare them. This is a sort of visualization of what the system does.
Yeah, so unfortunately, even after that investigation, nothing to Mr. Tsikhaluk, nothing changed in Mr. Tsikhaluk's life. He's still the commander of Police Special Regiment. He is still serving. From what we can say is that, well, basically nothing changed, which leads to conclusion that, unfortunately, investigating cases of violence on Maidan is not a priority for General Prosecutor's Office.
Yet, what we had this winter, that the former president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, had been in absentia. He was not present, but charged with treason, high treason, and sentenced for 13 years. He is currently in Russia, so, you know, like it's not exactly that he's serving his term. I probably would ask also to show a bit of the quote of Viktor Yanukovych at his last press conference. He's given a lot of them in Russia. So let's hear about him. Let's hear from him.
Everyone understands that the court made its decision exactly as told by the authorities. There was an unprecedented pressure on the court. The court's decision has absolutely nothing to do with the law. I am sure that Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko cannot win the election honestly. He does not have that kind of support from voters. The 5 years that passed after 2014, after the coup, I see as the darkest pages in the history of Ukraine as an independent state.
So what we have Viktor Yanukovych like telling what he wants, not sometimes the things which doesn't make sense, but what we can say about this. So, and we still expect in Ukraine that Yanukovych has to be the witness in some of the cases. Or
so I should say that these are two different cases. So trial against those who are responsible for the killings on Institutska Street is one thing, and trial against Yanukovych in absentia is a second thing. So Yanukovych was accused of higher treason, and it's another case in which there are different thoughts and different opinions about this, the way that the way this whole trial was handled. The thing is that Yanukovych, it made impossible for Ukraine to have Yanukovych tried in the case of higher treason once again. So it's been done in absentia, and now it's just you cannot have him on this trial again. Even if for some reason he ends up in Ukraine, you cannot do that. So the case is closed. He will appeal, of course, and he will probably take this case to the European Court of Rights, because he believes there were
like political.
Yeah, it's political, and there were other things that he may appeal to, but still, it's done. But a case on the killings on Maidan, it's a separate thing, and he already had his word. What he said as a witness at this trial, and he said that he is not involved at all with these killings. He denied that, and he thanked to the officers of Berkut for their work, and he said that they were used by politicians in this, crash between political forces, as he puts it. And they are just innocent victims of this situation.
But Lina, to finalize, still there were a lot of foreign press here during the Maidan. It was a big international story, and people are coming back after 5 years to see what had happened. And even for the Ukrainians, it's very difficult to get understanding what's going on. We can discuss why it happens, but there are some reasons. Sometimes it's unfortunate. But what do you would say? What the people should know? What should people from abroad say? Are there investigations?
I think the main fact, what people should know in Ukraine and outside Ukraine, is that there is an investigation, and there is this small group of investigators that were digging for years and years, that were digging facts. They were sitting in their small, gray cabinets with the piles of evidence and papers, and they were working. Unfortunately, I don't know why. Maybe because there were so many things in Ukraine happening. The war, the political struggles. So many things are happening that sometimes you lose the focus. And unfortunately it's not something that the media also is following. So first thing is that there is an investigation. There are people on trial, and to know things, you need to listen, and you need to follow that trial. Secondly is that unfortunately the case of Maidan and the case as any other case is being also very much speculated on and politicized by specific people who are in very responsible positions, like the general prosecutor, who proved through these years in his position, in his office, that he remains a politician and that he puts his political ambition over justice. And it is very unfortunate.
But finishing with something else, I should say that we are here at Hromadske and trying to reconstruct some of the events. Some of them are not that tragic, but it's interesting really to reconstruct and show how it had happened. So for the end of the show, I'd like to show the cartoon which we have done on exactly the moment when everybody was confused because Viktor Yanukovych just disappeared from Ukraine, but the team had tried to reconstruct his way, how exactly he was escaping from Ukraine, with whose help, and it also gives a lot of things to think and about the role of Russia, of course.
It's February 21st, 2014. Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych flees public office and heads to his estate. In the meantime, rallies continue on Independence Square while government forces are in disarray. Yanukovych spends the day packing up his treasures and later flies east to Kharkiv. The next day, Yanukovych meets with Kharkiv Mayor Hanaidi Kernez and lawmaker Mikhailo Dobkin. Yanukovych wants to federalize the southern and eastern regions of Ukraine, but his advisors warn him not to.
Завтра буду выступать перед народом. Сока вы можете согнать. Надо показать, что нас много.
Витя, оно того не стоит. Там какие-то радикалы ходят. Лучше туда не суйся.
Хорошо, не буду.
Yanukovych is already en route to Russia when his pilot is ordered to turn back.
Ви повинні негайно повернутися назад до Харкова. Це наказ Олександра Турчинова.
У нас не вистачить пального, ми вже далеко відлетіли. Сідаємо в Донецьку. Кінець зв'язку.
Yanukovych's team then lands at the Donetsk airport and his men start loading 2 private jets. But the flight is delayed.
Вибачте, але ми не можемо вилетіти, бо там якісь проблеми з документами. Не хвилюйтесь.
Ну що там такое? Быстрее давайте решайте.
Ми не дозволимо вам вилетіти з аеропорту. Вийдіть з літака і прямуйте за нами.
Все нормально, мы охраняем президента. Мы садимся в машины и едем отсюда.
У нас є наказ не випустити вас з аеропорту.
Yanukovych's crew then heads to the center of Donetsk, to the house of oligarch Renat Akhmetov, where his son Alexander Yanukovych is already waiting. They brainstorm about what to do next.
Всем выключить телефоны и положить их в этот пакет. Готовимся к выезду в Крым.
The group then sets off for the Crimean Peninsula. In the morning, the motorcade stops at the town of Berdyansk. 3 Russian Mi-8 military helicopters pick them up. Later, the helicopters land in the military airfield in the city of Yeisk, Russia. Yanukovych's group is escorted to a nearby hangar and prepared to travel by air in an AN-26. During the flight, the pilots report a technical malfunction, so the plane lands at the Black Sea town of Anapa, and by noon, Yanukovych is already in Crimea. Yanukovych tells his team that he is leaving Ukraine.
Я еду в Россию. Кто хочет, может со мной. Или идти назад в Киев. Я никого не заставляю, решать вам.
Later, Viktor Yanukovych is escorted to Rostov-on-Don by the Russian Navy.
So with all the discussion we have here today, it's just probably important to mention that it's not yet history. It's an actual trial, actual process. Still a lot to investigate. So thanks a lot for explaining. Thanks a lot for your work. And I would just say to all of our audience, there are way more information on our webpage, en.hromadske.ua, on Twitter, on Facebook. So sign up also for our weekly newsletter. And know more. And thanks a lot for your attention, and see you in a week.